Well, thank you all so much for joining today. My name is Kaylee Clark, and I'm the Customer Success Manager for your account. So I will be walking you through the training today. And just to go over the agenda really quickly here, what we're going to do is go through just kind of an introduction to Pull Everywhere and some of the activities and visual settings. Um, Specifically, we did have a visual update, so we'll be seeing some of those new changes there. And then we'll be going through how to use Pull Everywhere via the website and PowerPoint. And then we'll jump in, of course, to the reporting side of things along with the Canvas integration. I'll share some best practices, and then we'll have a little bit of time at the end for a Q&A as well. So if you have any questions, of course, feel free to ask throughout the training, but I'll try to save as much time at the end for questions as possible. All right, so let's jump on in here. And just to get started here, I actually do have a quick activity for us. So if you all want to make your way to pollev.com/Kaylee, and then I wanted to ask you all how much you've used Pull Everywhere, just so we can see how much experience you all have. Okay. All right. Looks like most people so far have never used it, but we have some people here with a decent amount of experience. That's great. Okay, we'll give this a couple more seconds here. All right. Awesome. So it looks like most people have never used it. And then probably about the other half have either used it a few times or we have a few people here who are quite experienced, which is awesome. All right, let's go ahead and move on here. So for those of you who have never used it, let's just quickly go through what Poll Everywhere actually is. So Poll Everywhere is a student engagement tool that's going to allow you to spark conversations with your students in real time. So, not only are you going to be able to maintain your participants' attention in class, but it's also going to be really beneficial for, gathering insights over time. It's great for grading and participation points, things like that. And it really is a versatile tool. So you can utilize it in person, you can utilize it in remote or hybrid settings as well. It's great all around, and we'll go through some of the ways that you can utilize it today. So just to start off here, with just a general overview of some of the activities that we have, we do have 6 activity types here. So we have our multiple choice activity type, which is pretty self-explanatory. That's going to be a question with a set of specific answers. Then we have our word cloud and Q&A activity types, which are more of our free response activities. We have our clickable image where you'll actually be able to upload an image and have students click on specific regions and get graded on that. And then our competition, which is going to be a series of multiple choice questions with time-based scoring. So that's a fun one for things like, exam review sessions, quizzes, things like that you want to make a little bit more fun. And then the last thing here is going to be our survey. which is really going to be all of these activities combined into one. But surveys are primarily used for asynchronous engagement. So that's kind of a general overview before we dive in here. But I do want to kind of quickly ask you all which activities you'd like to learn about today, just based off of that, or if you're familiar with Poll Everywhere, which activities you'd like to learn a little bit more about. So again, this is on my same response link as the previous activity. So if you want to go there and quickly respond. And today we should have time to go through 2 activities live. So I'll pick the top 2 here and we can go through those ones. All right, we'll give this a couple more seconds. Okay, and I see in the chat that some people are interested to utilize this for attendance. So we can look at some ways to do that today as well. Yes, so in regards to the question in the chat while we're waiting for the final answers to come in here, it is possible to tell when you've responded. So one of the things we'll go through today is how to get students to register, which means they'll log in. So when you click on a response on an activity, they'll be able to see when it's turns blue and it'll say a 1 next to it for multiple choice questions that you've responded. That means that the response has been recorded. Same thing for open-ended activities. They'll be able to see their previously submitted responses while the activity is active. But through their account, they'll also be able to see their response history. We do have a student guide on our website that I'll share with you at the end of this training. That's going to be really beneficial for students, just walks them through where they can access certain things within Poll Everywhere. All right, so let's go ahead and move on here. But it looks like multiple choice and competition were the top 2. So we can go through both of those. And then if we do have additional time, we can try to squeeze in one more activity, but we should have time at least for multiple choice and competition here. All right, awesome. So we'll jump into the platform here in a second. But again, within Poll Everywhere, just some of the highlights here of things you can do is you're going to be able to create activities and organize them. You'll present them either via our website or our slideware integrations. You can share them with your team members and then, of course, create reports and export those directly to Canvas. So let's go ahead and jump into Poll Everywhere itself here really quickly. So when you log in, you're going to land on the home page here. And there's a couple of items that I do want to point out on this page before we move into the Activities tab. One of which, and probably the most important, is going to be your response URL. So this, of course, is where students are going to go to respond to your questions. Typically, this does default as your full name, I believe, and a couple of numbers. So you may want to change that just to simplify that down a little bit, which you can do here. You can see your recent activities and even create an activity from this page. And then we do also have our applications linked here. So our PowerPoint integration, our Google Slides integration, all of that will be linked here as well. So if you need to access that, that'll be right on the home page there. And then I do want to quickly point out as well within Poll Everywhere, if you see this little headset icon here, this is actually our support team's information. So feel free to reach out to our support team with any questions or help with troubleshooting. You can call or email them, and students are free to reach out to them as well. So if they're having any issues with their student accounts, they can reach out. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the activities tab here. And this is where you're going to be able to see all of your existing activities, your existing folders, and then you can create activities and folders here as well. I do highly recommend utilizing folders and organizing them by your classes, just because you can see here, if you leave your activities out of folders, it can get a little bit confusing if you need to come back and edit them later. So definitely recommend utilizing the folders there. And let's go ahead and just jump into creating activities here. So we can start off with multiple choice, and then we'll go into competition after that. All right. So with our multiple choice question, we'll first input a question here. So for our example, we'll say, what day is today? Great. And input some answer choices here. You can add options using this item here. Now, one thing of note with multiple choice questions that's going to be really nice for specific questions is that you can also upload an image to each answer choice. So say I had images for these 3 responses here that I wanted to add instead of text, I can do that there. You can also add an image to the question as well. It is going to be a little bit smaller, so just keep that in mind if you do utilize that. But the answer choices images are definitely really beneficial. And then, of course, for multiple choice questions, you will want to set up a correct answer some of the time. So all you'll need to do to select the correct answer is just click on that check mark. That'll mark it as correct. And you can have multiple correct answers as well. So keep that in mind. But of course, for this question, there is only one correct answer, which is Friday. All right. So once you're done inputting the question and the answers, we'll go ahead and hit create here. And you can see that the activity is created. And now what we'll want to do is come in here and go through some of the different settings. So depending on how you're utilizing the activity, you may want to change some things or you may want to leave it as is, but we'll go through those right now. And as you can see, if you have utilized Poll Everywhere before and you maybe haven't been in here in a while, you can see our activities have been updated. So the joining instructions are now look a little bit different, and we also have added a QR code just for ease of use. Just one thing of note as well, if you are in a larger classroom, you can hover over this and click to expand it. So if your students at the back of class are having trouble with scanning, just keep that in mind. You can always click on that to make it bigger. All right, so let's first go through our visual settings here. So this is really going to change the look and feel of the question itself. For multiple choice activities, we do also have 3 different view options for the answers. We have our bar chart, our column chart, and then our donut chart. So depending on the question, you may want to select a specific view here. So for this one, we'll do the column chart. And then you can change things here as well, like our color schemes, font, things like that. You can even add an image as the background. So if you want to, change the poll to have specific branding for CSULB, or maybe even just for your course specifically, we do have quite a few different customizable settings here. Now, one that I really like to point out is going to be this total results. So I always recommend that you show this on the chart. So when you select that, you'll see here that this check mark with a number next to it is going to pop up. This is going to be really beneficial, especially again in larger classes. This will allow you to see the total number of responses that have come in. So that way, if you're in a class of say 50 students, and you can see that only 20 have responded so far, you may want to give it a little bit more time. Whereas if you can see, okay, all 50 or maybe 45 have responded, so you can determine when is best to move on. So this is definitely beneficial, especially again in those larger classes where it'll be harder to tell how many people have responded. So those are the visual settings. And then the other settings are going to be under this configure tab. So this is really going to be more along the lines of how many responses can come in, who can respond, things like that. The first tab here, of course, you can see is how people can respond. So Poll Everywhere is compatible with text messaging along with just our web version, which is, of course, the response link that you all were using. I typically would recommend always using the website to have students respond, just because I find that's the better participant experience. And text messaging isn't compatible with all of our activity types. For example, our competition and our survey aren't compatible through text messaging. So just keep that in mind. I find it's a little less confusing just to use the web, but text messaging is available if you would like to use it. All right, so the next thing here is going to be audience restriction and identity. And this here is going to be really important, especially if you do plan to utilize this for grading or participation points, anything like that. If you're planning to export grades back to Canvas, this is going to be really important for that. So right here where it says who can participate, the default is going to be everyone with no restrictions. Basically what that means is it's not going to require your students to log into a Poll Everywhere participant account in order to participate. So it's not going to track their email or anything like that. It's just going to have them input a screen name, which, they can input, their first name for that. They could even skip it and it'll just assign them a guest name. So this can be utilized if you're just using the question for engagement. But if you're using it for anything where you need to have the student's information, then you'll want to restrict it to registered participants only. So basically what that means is that your students will be required to log into their participant account before they respond to your activities. So it'll track them based on their full name along with their email. And the nice thing is here is, which we'll go through it in a few minutes here, is with the Canvas integration, it'll actually register them automatically. So it's not going to be any additional work from your end to register them. It'll automatically send them an email to create their account once you sync Canvas with Poll Everywhere. So keep that in mind, but this is really important to take a look at depending on the activity. And then for both of these options here, you do have the option as well to make the poll completely anonymous. So for feedback, anything like that, where you don't want to track students' information, you can make these questions completely anonymous as well. But just be careful with that because any responses from the past, the present, or the future will all be made anonymous if you select this setting there. So for this one, I'm going to go back to everyone so that you all can participate when we present it. All right, and then we have our response settings. You can change how many times each individual can respond, whether they can select each option more than once, and change their answers. One thing I like to note here is the participants results chart. So this is actually going to show the chart on your students' devices if you enable that. If you don't want the results to show up on their devices individually, you can choose not to show that. But I do think it's beneficial, again, especially in larger classrooms where it may be harder to see if you're sharing your screen in the front. And then the last item here that I do want to go over is showing the activity title. The activity title is the question. So basically, of course, this defaults to be turned on to show on participant devices. You can turn this off, and really the only reason that I would recommend turning this off is if you are going to be utilizing this question for attendance. So basically what it does is if you turn this off, it's going to hide the question from participant devices. So of course, the reason being is that if we hide this from participant devices, then any student at home is not going to be able to see the question. So if you utilize this for attendance, again, I would recommend turning off the activity title, and then typically we recommend choosing a question that's specific to class that day. For example, what word did I write on the front board, or what color shirt am I wearing today? Something specific to that class period, just to make sure that, again, it's something that only students in class would know. So those are two of the tips I can provide. And then the last thing here is going to be setting up a timer. So of course, this has use cases beyond attendance as well. But the timer is going to be helpful for attendance. It's also going to be helpful for quizzes or maybe even time boxing discussions, things like that. So if you turn this on, you'll see that timer pop up there. And then once the timer runs out, it'll automatically lock the activity so no one else can respond. All right, so we'll increase the timer for this one a little bit so we can see that. All right, so those are all of the settings. So now I'll get into presenting the activity. And I'm going to go ahead and activate it, and then I'll take a look at any questions in the chat. So there's a couple things here at the top. So we have our activate option or the present option. Those are the two ways that you can present this from the website. The only difference between these two buttons is that present is going to take you full screen. Activate is just going to keep you on the screen here. So we'll go ahead and present it. And then again, now that it's being presented, you can see that this is live on my response link. So again, if you missed that, it's still here at the top of my screen. And then you can see those responses as they come in live. Now, if you want to show the correct answer, we do have this menu that'll pop up as you're presenting. So you can toggle between the instructions slide, the responses slide, and then the correctness slide as well. So now that I've selected correctness, and we'll wait for that menu to disappear, you can see that Friday is marked as the correct answer, and the other answers are grayed out slightly.
Kaylee, can we have the timer show up on the student side?
Unfortunately, the timer will only show up on your screen. So as you activate the activity, you'll want to share your screen with the class, and the timer will only show up on your end. It won't show up directly on the participant's device.
Can they also extend the time if they think students need more time?
Yes, so that's also going to be a function in this menu down here. So you can see we have a couple different controls. We have a pause um, option for the timer. So if you click on that, it's going to pause it right on the time it's at. You can also restart the timer if needed. So if you want to give students more time, you can reset the timer. And if you want to end it even before the timer is up, you can actually just utilize the lock option here, which will lock the poll right when you click on that, so that no one else can respond after that's selected. So don't worry if the timer runs out, you still can reset it directly from the menu. You don't have to exit the screen to do that. All right. And in regards to that last question in the chat, you can um, you can do the same things in a slide presentation as well. So in the slide presentation, when you toggle to a poll everywhere slide, you'll have the same menu pop up. So for the timer, for the instructions to responses, all of that sort of stuff, this same menu will pop up there, so you can utilize those controls. All right, and then this last question. So at this point, you can only give, it's only going to score based on correct versus incorrect answers. However, we are working on a feature right now actually that will allow you to kind of customize that a little bit more. And we'll be sharing information with everyone as we get a little bit closer to that release, but just know that it is coming. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to our next activity here, and we'll go into our competition. All right, so again, as I mentioned, competitions are going to be a series of multiple choice questions where participants will kind of compete to answer the fastest to get the most points. So I'll go ahead and make a training competition. And for our first question here, we'll do the same question. And all right, and then of course, this is going to be the same sort of setup as when you're setting up a multiple choice question. And you can add another question with this button here. I do like to mention for competitions as well that I find that they're really beneficial for icebreakers too, and it's really fun at the beginning of a course to maybe do like getting to know your professor type of competition and have some trivia in here about yourself. I think it's a fun way for students to get to know you, and it kind of lightens the mood in the beginning of the course. All right, so let's select that there, and then we'll go ahead and create this here. Now, once we've created the competition, you can see here, it looks a little bit different than some of our other activity types in terms of how it can be edited. We do have a little bit less functionality as far as the visuals for this one go, but there are still some settings you'll want to adjust here. So first thing, and again, one of the most important is whether or not you're restricting participants. So if you do plan to use this for participation points, anything like that, you'll want to turn this on. And by default, we do allow students to change their answers, but you can turn this off here if you'd like to. And then the last thing here really is going to be the time-based scoring. So you can turn this off if you'd like to. which in that case, it's just going to score based on correct versus incorrect answers. I, of course, would recommend keeping it on just because it seems to be more enjoyable and fun that way. But of course, you can turn it off for specific things there. And then if you do keep it on, you can also adjust the timer here. So it does default to 20 seconds, but if you have questions that are going to require, calculations, things like that, you may want to increase that. So just keep that in mind. For our questions today, I think 20 seconds should be plenty of time. And then in terms of editing the questions specifically, if you need to do that, you'll just click on that question and hit that pencil icon. And you can also use this arrow option to move the questions order around as well. So that's pretty much all for the setup competitions. Again, it's a little bit more simple than our other activity types. But you can play this right here directly through the website. But I'm actually going to stop sharing for a second and show you how to do that here in PowerPoint. So give me 1 second while I share my screen again. Okay, perfect. Now, today I will be showing you how to utilize the PowerPoint integration for Mac. For Windows, it is going to look a little bit different, but the functionality is exactly the same. So basically, the only difference is for Mac, you'll see you're going to use a separate Pull Everywhere window. It's a separate application completely, whereas for Windows, it's actually going to show up directly in your toolbox here as a tab that says Pull Everywhere. So just keep that in mind. All right, and then we're going to go in and we'll add our training competition here. So you're just going to select that, and then you can click Insert Slides. Now you can input multiple activities at once, but for now we're just going to do this one activity here. And you can see for competitions, it's going to automatically input multiple slides. So the way that this integration works is when you go into slideshow mode, it'll automatically, when you click on next slide, it'll automatically activate the questions as we move through the presentation. So now we'll go ahead and go into slideshow mode. And we can actually get started with this competition here. All right. So we'll go to next slide. So again, same response link if you want to participate in this competition. So we'll start off with our question, what is the fastest animal listed? All right, and you can see here, so now we've toggled to this question. The timer starts running automatically. The answer choices, you can, the answer responses number is here. And you can see for competitions as well, it does default to show only the instructions so that students can't see their colleagues' answers before the question moves to the leaderboard, basically. All right, so now we can see those responses there, and we can see the leaderboard here as well. So it does show the top 3 typically at the end. Throughout the presentation, it'll show up to 10. But again, if you need to pull a more detailed list, you can do that in reporting. So we'll go through that in a moment. All right. Keep in mind as well, again, you can move on before the timer is up and it'll lock the activity when you move to that next slide. All right, so here are our responses there. And then we can see the top three. And again, if you need to pull more than the top three, you can do so in reporting, but I find that it's beneficial sometimes to give students incentives, things like that. I've seen that work really well in situations where it's maybe an exam review, something like that. And in that case, the top three would get like an extra credit point or something like that. That's been something that I've seen work really well. And so that is always accessible through the activity itself. All right. So in terms of the scoring for the competitions, just to clarify, so for each question, you'll get up to 1,000 points. So if you get the correct answer and you get it as quickly as possible, you'll get 1,000 points. Whereas if you get the correct answer and answer a little bit slower, you'll get less points, depending on how long you answer. And then, of course, if you get the incorrect answer, it's going to give you 0 points. So basically, 1,000 points is the maximum you can get per question. All right. Awesome. So now, in a moment, we're going to be moving on to the reporting and Canvas integration. One thing I do want to just quickly point out here is this pinned activity, because I find that this is a really beneficial feature that not everyone knows about. This is going to allow you to pin a Q&A activity. So you can actually see on my response link here. Let me pull that up so you can see. Of course, we have our activated activity. We do also have a pinned activity as well. So you can see here, this activity is going to be active regardless of the other questions that you're presenting. So this is great to set up if you want to have kind of a back channel of communication with your students throughout the lecture. Maybe students don't feel comfortable interrupting during class, or they don't want to raise their hand in front of everyone when they have a question. This is great to have running during class. Just let your students know it's there. And then at the end of class, you can pull up this activity and go through all of the questions. If you click on the settings option here, it's going to take you through the setup process. But again, it's really, really simple. All you need to do is just have a Q&A activity created, and you'll set it up through the settings there. All right. Awesome. And in regards to the question in the chat about participation points, it is possible to give participation points rather than a grade. So we'll go through that actually right now as we go through reporting. All right, so I'm going to quickly pause my screen share so I can just get our Canvas pulled up here. So give me one moment. And we'll go through how to sync a course along with how to input the grades in there. Okay, perfect. So now that we're in Canvas, of course, if this is a new course, what you'll want to do is first, you're going to want to sync Pull Everywhere. You're going to want to sync the course to your Pull Everywhere account. So you'll click on the Pull Everywhere tab here in that course, and you're just going to click on this Continue option. All right. So now you can see that it's going to automatically pull up that course. within your Poll Everywhere account. If you're not logged into Poll Everywhere, you'll first be prompted to log in there, and then it'll pull up this screen. So what you're going to want to do first when you're syncing this course initially is just click Sync Roster. Now, what that is going to do is it's automatically going to register all of your students to your course in Poll Everywhere. So you can see if we go to the participants page, you'll see that group for that course is automatically created and it adds those students in automatically. So those students will receive an email that's going to let them know that they've been invited to register and set up their account with you. If you need to resync the roster, for example, after the add drop date is done, you can click on the LMS connections there and click on sync roster again. So what that is going to do is it's going to resync it. So anyone who has been dropped from the course will be removed and anyone additional will be invited at that point. All right, so we'll click in on the course again. And now in order to add grades or export grades to this course, we can click on this option here, add new gradebook. And what that is going to do is it's actually going to automatically take you to the reporting tab. So when you're exporting to Canvas, you are going to want to utilize the gradebook report option. So we have that selected automatically. So we'll go ahead and click continue here. And then you can see, you can create any activity and report on that there. So let's actually go in and quickly create this test. So we'll create that there. All right. So let's go back in. Okay. So we'll create that activity there and create the report. All right. So for this specific report, let me actually go back in and submit a response so that you can actually see what it looks like there. And if you want to submit a response as well, feel free, but one should be fine. Okay. Awesome. So within that report here, we'll update that. Awesome. So once that is done, you can see here for this specific activity, we're going to have participation. If if the activity, excuse me, is graded, then you're also going to have a grade column here, and you'll be able to choose whether you're exporting grades or participation to Canvas. So for this example, we'll export participation, but again, you can also export grades, which is going to be the correct versus incorrect answer. Participation is just going to be whether or not they answered. One thing to note here as well is if you have archived responses on any activity, you'll see that here. So when you click on select run, it'll also show you the archived responses. So if you want to export any previous responses to Canvas, you can do that via those archived runs here. So just keep that in mind. When you do export it as well, it's going to automatically export to the grades section in Canvas, and it's going to name it whatever the report is called here. So that does default to be the question of the activity, but you can rename that. So if you want it to be something other than the question, just keep that in mind before you export it there. Now, once you're all set here, we'll just click export, and you can see, again, it's going to ask you whether you want to export grade or participation points. So we'll select participation and click next. And you can see that that's going to say export complete, and it's now going to be processing in the background. So that's going to sync over to Canvas automatically once you've exported it there. And we'll go back in here and take a look. Okay. Awesome. So you can see here that that test activity has exported over. Now it's going to give zeros here, of course, because none of these students participated in that activity. But again, depending on the participation grade, it'll give points out of 100 here. So for example, if they answered 1 out of 2, it's going to give them a 50 out of 100 here. So that's how that that grade is going to sync over. You can input multiple activities into that same report as well. So if you wanted to take an average of all of those and score them out of 100, then just input multiple activities into this report here, and then it'll take the average out of all of those. So say, you know, they answered 5 out of the 10 questions that you've listed in this report, it'll give them that 50%. And that's correct. They're not, participants won't be able to see how much others participated. They're only going to see anything related to their own grades or their own responses. Really the only time within Poll Everywhere that they'll be able to see other students' information is just seeing the students' names pop up on the competition. That's really going to be the only time they'll ever see another student's name. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and exit out here. All right, and now the last thing before we, I guess, kind of exit Poll Everywhere is just going to be sharing activities. So in sharing activities, there's a couple things you'll want to note. Number one, you will need to be added to a team. So you can see here, when you're not a part of a team, it's going to say no teams here. If you would like to be added to a team, you will need to reach out to an administrator of your account, as you can see here. As presenters are unable to create teams, it's only going to be account administrators. And then the second thing to keep in mind is you will want to create a folder. So activities can only be shared if you have them in a folder. So let's create a test folder and we'll put this in there. Now, once you have that folder created with that activity, all you'll need to do is select that and you will click share. And then what that is going to do is it's going to allow anyone on the team that you're on to access this activity, to present it to their own students. So this is great if you want to share materials with your peers. What's beneficial, however, is that any activity that you create and share, no one else will be able to edit it or see your responses. So you can still, again, keep your students' responses private. No one else will be able to see that information. They'll just be able to see any responses that come in as they present it. So that's just one thing to keep in mind there. All right, so let's go back in to our slides here. So I will be sharing this information here, but again, just wanted to show all of our applications here specifically for slideware. So we have Google Slides along with PowerPoint for Mac and Windows. And you can also utilize that Mac integration for Keynote as well. So if you like Keynote, we are compatible with that one too. And then I wanted to just quickly share some best practices here. So just some things that are beneficial, especially if you haven't utilized Poll Everywhere before or you're introducing it to a class for the first time. It's definitely beneficial to, of course, give instructions up front, and then we'll want to do, a practice poll or an icebreaker, something of that sort, before you're actually utilizing this for grades or participation points, anything like that. Of course, next thing here is just make sure you're going slow and then mixing up activity types just to get the most engagement from your students. And then, of course, you'll want to make sure you're pausing for Q&A. And as I mentioned earlier, offering incentives always seems to help with getting student engagement up. So just some things to keep in mind. And I've also linked some of our resources here. So again, we do have an instructor guide along with a student guide directly on our website, polleverywhere.com. So if you want to send that out to your students, that just gives them a nice overview of how to access their account, how to see their responses, history, things like that. And the other resource that I like to point out is actually our webinars. So if you click on this link here, which again, this is on our website as well. This is going to take you here to this webinars page. And we typically host a webinar once a month. So you can see here, depending on the time of the year, we host different topics. But these are really beneficial. Especially I would say this getting started with Poll Everywhere for back to school. That's going to be a great one as well. But throughout the year, you're more than welcome to join as many as you want. And anyone is welcome to join. You can also see our previously recorded webinars on this page too. So if you want to take a look back at any of those, that's an option as well. All right, and then I just put our support team's information in here again, just as a reminder, but they are available 8 to 8 Eastern time, Monday through Friday. So feel free to reach out to them during those hours and they'll get back to you very quickly with help with troubleshooting or even just how to do something within Poll Everywhere. All right. Awesome. Well, I think that was all of the content that I had to go through. So are there any questions at this point? That I can answer? And let me pull up my activity here.
Thank you so much, Kaylee. It was a really great presentation.
Of course, yeah, no problem.
I have a question about the default settings. For example, I'd like to have 60 seconds for students to respond instead of the 20 seconds. Can I set that for all the questions I put in?
Yes, so one thing that would be great for that I can quickly show you here is going to be under your profile. So if you go into your profile and go to your activity settings, you can see here you can set up the defaults here for those things, but you can also set up a template activity. So any settings on that template activity is going to be the default for when you create any new activities. So if you have an activity set up that you like, the timer set at 60 seconds, the visual settings is what you want pretty much most of the time, you can set that up here, and that will set all of those things as the default for any future activities that you create.
Thank you.
Of course.